UFC fans who had been eagerly awaiting Ilia Topuria's first title defense received an update that was far from exciting. The Spanish fighter, who captured the lightweight belt in spectacular fashion by brutally knocking out Charles Oliveira at UFC 317, had been hailed as one of the most electrifying names in the sport today. Because of that, many expected him to return quickly to the octagon before the end of 2024. However, the champion himself revealed that there is no concrete plan for his comeback, frustrating expectations and raising questions about his next moves. Topuria's victory over Oliveira had solidified his image as a true rising star. El Matador walked away practically unscathed from the fight, which only reinforced the idea that he could have a quick turnaround and make his first defense before the year was over. On top of that, the lightweight division is loaded with potential challengers, all with their eyes fixed on the belt now in the hands of the Spaniard. The picture, therefore, seemed perfect for immediate continuity. A healthy champion, a roster full of possible contenders, and fans clamoring for blockbuster fights. Despite this, Ilia was quick to cool down expectations during a WoW press conference, pouring cold water on those who were eager to see him back in action soon. Asked about his plans, he was blunt. "Well, I honestly have no idea when I'm going to defend my title. The truth is, we're in negotiations. We are in the middle of this whole process, working on the schedule for what's left of this year or for next year. So, I can't give you a specific answer right now." Topuria's words were received with disappointment by much of the MMA community. Beyond the excitement surrounding his first defense, there is also a line of fighters ready to compete for the title. Among them, perhaps the most deserving is Arman Tsarukyan, considered by many to be the real #1 in the division. The Armenian is in tremendous form, coming off impressive wins, and the matchup with Topuria has been widely discussed among experts and fans alike for months. The Spanish champion, however, has shown no interest in accepting that matchup. In fact, he had already made it clear that he has no intention of facing Tsarukyan right now. This stance has generated criticism and sparked accusations that he is choosing more convenient opponents rather than taking on the most dangerous challenger available. Besides Tsarukyan, two other names entered the conversation. Justin Gaethje, the former interim champion and always one of the UFC's most popular fighters, and Paddy Pimblett, the rising English star who even had a heated stare-down with Topuria back in July, igniting the flames of a potential rivalry. But to everyone's surprise, the Spaniard made it clear that, at least for now, none of those three will be his next opponent. In a very straightforward way, he declared, "None of them, that's the truth. For now, I don't have anyone." That statement made the scenario even murkier. After all, if it won't be Tsarukyan, Gaethje, or Pimblett, then who could possibly be Topuria's first title challenger? The answer is far from simple. Looking at the lightweight rankings, very few names seem to fit the bill at the moment. The only fighter in the top 5 coming off a win is Max Holloway. However, the Hawaiian already fought Topuria last year in a featherweight title bout and was defeated. Running that matchup back so soon wouldn't carry much sporting or commercial appeal, lowering the odds that the UFC will go down that path. As a result, all attention inevitably shifts back to Arman Tsarukyan and Justin Gaethje. For many analysts, it's practically impossible for Topuria to avoid these two names in his first defense. Tsarukyan represents the most legitimate and challenging sporting contest, while Gaethje brings massive star power, not to mention that he has already stated publicly that he might even retire if he doesn't get that opportunity. This situation puts Ilia in a delicate position. On the one hand, he knows he needs to keep fueling his rising star status by delivering fights that truly excite the fans. On the other, his reluctance to face certain rivals could tarnish his image as a fearless champion. The UFC, meanwhile, will have to strike a balance between commercial spectacle and sporting legitimacy, something the organization has not always managed with ease. In the meantime, the public remains divided. Some believe that Topuria is simply negotiating the best possible terms for his title defense, while others see him as a calculating champion, trying to avoid high-risk fights at the beginning of his reign. What is certain is that regardless of who his next opponent will be, the pressure is already enormous, and every move the Spaniard makes will be closely monitored by fans and the media. In the end, all signs suggest that Ilia Topuria's first defense will not happen before the start of next year. And when he finally steps into action again, it will be nearly impossible for him to avoid facing one of the two most feared and demanded names by fans, Arman Tsarukyan or Justin Gaethje. Any other route may be seen as running away, and will inevitably cast doubt on his legitimacy as champion. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere in the UFC has grown heavier regarding the rivalry between Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. The former lightweight champion, now setting his sights on a new challenge at welterweight, once again fired shots at the Spaniard and did not hold back his criticism, accusing the current belt holder of purposely avoiding one of the division's most dangerous threats. Arman Tsarukyan. Makhachev, who will return in November at UFC 322 to face Jack Della Maddalena in his welterweight debut, left behind the lightweight belt that eventually landed in the hands of Ilia Topuria. Despite officially moving away from the division, the Dagestani never misses a chance to provoke the Spaniard and cast doubt on the way he has conducted himself as champion. According to Islam, Topuria has not only been ducking a fight with Tsarukyan, but has even hinted that he wouldn't consider sharing the octagon with the Armenian at all, despite the pressure from the MMA community and fans who have been calling for the fight. In his own words, the former champion launched a harsh and direct attack. It's in secret that Ilia Topuria has been avoiding Arman Tsarukyan. I've already seen some comments floating online where he says, "I'd rather retire than fight Arman." Arman is on a very good streak, and, without a doubt, he's the toughest test the champion could possibly face. This accusation from Makhachev adds even more fuel to the speculation that Topuria has been hand-picking his opponents, targeting names that bring media attention and pay-per-view buys, but don't pose as high a risk as Tsarukyan. It's worth remembering that besides the Armenian, the Spaniard has also downplayed talks of a showdown with former interim champion Justin Gaethje and even Paddy Pimblett. Despite their intense stare-down in July, which had fans buzzing, the current picture makes it clear that even with Makhachev's move up in weight, his rivalry with Topuria remains alive. And to spice things up even further, one of the greatest legends in UFC history, Khabib Nurmagomedov, also decided to weigh in on the situation. The former lightweight champion, Hall of Famer, and Makhachev's mentor was emphatic in his assessment of Topuria's chances against Arman Tsarukyan. In the eyes of the Eagle of Dagestan, the Spaniard would stand no chance at all. In his analysis, Khabib was straightforward and didn't mince words when stressing his faith in Tsarukyan. "I don't see Topuria having any chance against Tsarukyan. Arman fights very well at distance against strikers. He knows how to keep the range. He works better with his kicks, and now he has improved a lot. If they had fought 3 years ago, maybe he wouldn't have been so cautious. But today you can clearly see the dangers that Topuria brings." Even so, I believe that right now, the best lightweight in the world is Tsarukyan. Khabib's statement made a big impact among fans and analysts. For many, the former champion's approval acts like a definitive seal, showing that Tsarukyan is already seen as the rightful heir among the 155-pound fighters. Furthermore, his words put Ilia Topuria in a tough spot. If there was already pressure for him to defend against Arman, now, with Khabib's endorsement, that pressure will only grow stronger. On the other side, Topuria remains silent about a potential clash with the Armenian. The Spaniard seems determined to stick to his own plans, ignoring much of the criticism and choosing a path that, in Islam Makhachev's view, reeks of cowardice. Meanwhile, Arman Tsarukyan continues building his journey with convincing victories, maintaining his position as the most feared challenger to the current champion. The rivalry between Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria, which began with barbs and indirect shots, has now grown with the involvement of other great names, such as Khabib Nurmagomedov. And judging by the words of both Dagestanis, Topuria's reputation as a legitimate champion is increasingly under fire. A new and somewhat unexpected chapter may also be unfolding in the world of martial arts and boxing. UFC lightweight champion Ilia Topuria seems to have started a rivalry of sorts with none other than Terence Crawford, the multi-division world champion and one of the greatest boxers of this era. What began as a seemingly light exchange of words quickly escalated, placing two stars from different combat sports on a collision course, and even sparking talk of a potential showdown in the future. The story began when Ilia Topuria, known for his almost unshakable confidence, posted on social media a picture of himself alongside Terence Crawford. In the caption, he wrote a simple but effective provocation. Who wins this fight? The post immediately generated buzz among fans of both sports, who began debating what an eventual duel between El Matador and Bud Crawford might look like. But the teasing didn't stop there. Shortly after, the Spaniard went further and publicly declared that if he were to face Crawford in a boxing ring, he would knock him out in the very first round. That statement set social media on fire and drew attention from the specialized media. Since Topuria is not only a UFC champion, but also an athlete who has always shown confidence in predicting the outcomes of his fights. As expected, Crawford's response came quickly, and it was sharp. The boxer, who this Saturday will face a massive challenge against Canelo Alvarez in one of the most anticipated fights of the year, mocked the Spaniard and said that he must have been drunk to believe he could beat him in a boxing ring. The remark went viral instantly, reinforcing the notion that an unlikely rivalry was being born between the two champions from different worlds. The American's jab, however, did not go unnoticed by Ilia Topuria, who decided to fire back. In an interview, the Spaniard made it clear that he doesn't care much about Crawford's opinion itself, but rather about the way many boxers have been treating MMA fighters lately. I don't really have an opinion about what Crawford said. Whenever he wants to measure strength, whenever he wants to test his technique and skills, I am here to show him. What has been bothering me lately is that many boxers show up, interfere in our game, criticize us, and try to diminish us. The truth is that many MMA fighters have gone into boxing to test their abilities. But I don't know many of those boxers who talk so much and have actually tested themselves in MMA. But anyway, whenever they want, I am here. This response highlights something that has already become a trademark for Ilia Topuria: his unshakable self-confidence. Since arriving in the UFC, the Spaniard has demonstrated not only remarkable talent, but also the ability to accurately predict how his fights would unfold. That self-belief has been a cornerstone of his career, and, at the same time, fuel for rivalries and provocations like the one with Crawford. It's worth noting that Topuria is widely recognized as the best boxer within the UFC. His refined striking, accuracy in punches, and ability to dictate the rhythm of exchanges have led many to consider him superior even to Max Holloway, the former featherweight champion and current symbolic BMF title holder, long regarded as the best striker in MMA. The coronation of Topuria as the best boxer in the UFC seemed nearly unanimous among fans and analysts. However, when Crawford was recently asked who he considered the best boxer in the UFC, he surprised everyone by not naming Ilia Topuria. Instead, he unexpectedly pointed to another fighter. My guy, what's his name, Cody Garbrandt. He's the best boxer in the UFC. That statement shocked many, since Garbrandt, although a former bantamweight champion recognized for his boxing skills, is nowhere near the spotlight that Topuria currently enjoys. Many saw Crawford's comment as yet another way of provoking El Matador, downplaying his recognition within MMA. This creates an intriguing storyline. On one side, there is Ilia Topuria, the UFC lightweight champion on the rise, with a fighting style that blends confidence and aggression. On the other, Terence Crawford, undefeated multi-division world champion and regarded by many as the greatest boxer of his generation. Both have strong personalities, undeniable charisma, and a clear willingness to provoke rivals. The mix of these factors could transform this war of words into a real cross-sport rivalry, the kind of spectacle fans love to follow. And of course, there's a significant commercial factor involved in this type of crossover. Over the past several years, we've seen examples of fights between big boxing and MMA names becoming massive media events. The most notable case was Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor in 2017, which shattered pay-per-view records and generated astronomical sums. Even before that, Anderson Silva flirted with boxing challenges. And more recently, we saw Francis Ngannou take on Tyson Fury in a matchup that also gained worldwide attention. Ilia Topuria and Terence Crawford could very well be the next chapter in this cross-pollination between sports. While it's unlikely that Crawford would venture into MMA, the reverse, Topuria stepping into boxing, cannot be ruled out, especially considering the precedent set by other UFC stars. In the end, the rivalry is still in its early stages. What began with a seemingly harmless photo has already escalated to bold predictions, sharp taunts, and fiery responses. Now, the question is whether this verbal clash can grow into something bigger and eventually lead to a real fight. whether inside the octagon or in the ring. One thing is certain, with personalities like Ilia Topuria and Terence Crawford, fans can expect sparks to fly and plenty of controversial soundbites in the coming months. The scenario surrounding Ilia Topuria is both fascinating and concerning. Fascinating because it shows a young, confident, outspoken champion unafraid to say what he thinks, traits that have historically fueled great narratives in the UFC. Concerning because with each statement, he seems to drift further from what the MMA community values most, the sporting legitimacy of a champion. The lack of a concrete timeline for his first title defense is already enough to frustrate fans. But the fact that the Spaniard has openly dismissed names like Arman Tsarukyan and Justin Gaethje only adds more fuel to the fire. Arman Tsarukyan, in particular, has become something of a shadow over Topuria's reign. The Armenian is not only on an electrifying streak, but also carries the respect of analysts and even legends like Khabib Nurmagomedov, who has already made it clear that he believes Tsarukyan is the best lightweight in the world today. When someone of Khabib's stature, with his legacy, categorically states that Topuria wouldn't stand a chance against Tsarukyan, it doesn't just increase the pressure on the Spaniard, it creates a dangerous narrative that the true moral champion is still waiting outside the octagon for his opportunity. That storyline can erode Ilia's credibility if he keeps avoiding that matchup. Justin Gaethje is another chapter of this ongoing saga. The highlight has always been one of the most thrilling fighters in recent UFC history, with enormous popularity and a style that guarantees fireworks in any setting. When an athlete of his caliber publicly declares that he might even consider retirement if he doesn't get a title shot, the stakes rise dramatically. For the UFC, having Gaethje involved in a championship fight is not just about sport, but also about business. And when Ilia says he doesn't have anyone to face, he is essentially ignoring one of the most marketable and deserving fighters in the division. The verbal rivalry with Islam Makhachev also cannot be overlooked. Even moving up to welterweight, the Dagestani keeps poking at the Spaniard, pointing to his alleged refusal to fight Tsarukyan. This creates an environment where Topuria is no longer seen as a fearless champion, but rather as someone measuring risks and dodging confrontations. In a sport driven by narratives of courage and perseverance, that is the type of image that can quickly turn against him. Islam, even without fighting at lightweight anymore, remains an authoritative voice in the debate, and, alongside Khabib, keeps alive the idea that Topuria is more interested in holding onto his belt than defending it against the toughest challengers. At the same time, the unexpected element of the rivalry with Terence Crawford comes into play. This back and forth with one of the greatest boxers of today shows that Ilia is willing to seek the spotlight outside of MMA. The comparison to what happened with Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor in 2017 is inevitable. Back then, McGregor understood that beyond defending titles, the chance to face a boxing legend could change his life financially forever. The difference is that McGregor had already built a legacy in the UFC before venturing into boxing, whereas Topuria hasn't even defended his belt yet. For many, the Spaniard's focus on Crawford before solidifying his status as champion feels like an escape. A shortcut to fame and money without going through the true tests of the lightweight division. And it's not just about who Ilia will face, but also when. The idea that he won't step back into the octagon until 2025 is a cold shower for fans who expected an active champion willing to prove himself against anyone. History shows that inactive champions tend to lose relevance quickly. Just look at what happened to fighters like Tyron Woodley or even Conor McGregor after long absences. In the UFC, collective memory is short, and new stars emerge all the time.